It's day 4 now, and going to try and talk about my job. So I graduated college with a bachelor's in computer science, which means I can be a job title of like software engineer, software developer, or developer. There's a lot of variations on what sort of developer I could be, or engineer, or whatever, but it's all basically the same stuff. I'm writing code in some particular programming language. I think this happens in a lot of different jobs, but there's some aspects of programming that I really enjoy, and some that are pretty tedious and not so fun. The most fun are when you have sort of like an interesting like logic sort of puzzle to work out, and the tedious are when you're trying to just get all the different like technologies that you use to do your job to work together, because a lot of the times you're using like 10 different pieces of technology to try and do your job, but then 7 of them don't want to work with a couple of them, or there's a lot of incompatibility issues or random bugs that you'll run into in other software that stops you from doing your job. And then you have to spend hours or days trying to fix somebody else's problem before you can even start solving your own. So a programmer's life can be pretty low stress if you handle it properly. A lot of jobs, there's pressure to get stuff done by a certain deadline, but for programming, there is that as well, but there's only so much a programmer can do a day, and there's only so much we can progress, and companies just sort of have to deal with it. If we can't figure something out that day, then they just sort of have to wait, because there's no one else at the company who can do it. So if you look at it from that sort of approach, it can be a pretty laid back sort of job. You just do your best to get work done, and if you can't figure out how to get it done that day, then it's not that big a deal. You just come back the next day and try again. And there's only been maybe like less than a handful of problems that I've come across that I haven't been able to figure out eventually, or figure out a workaround or something like that. So most of the problems that you come across are not too terrible, and you can usually work them out in a few minutes or a couple hours or something like that. So I wanted to talk about more what it was like on like a day-to-day basis for me. So a lot of it will depend on the company that you're at, obviously. But for a programmer, your day-to-day is not too intensive. You usually pretty much are mostly by yourself most of the time, if you want to be. At least for me, it's mostly been, I sort of know the end goal that we need to get to, and then I just sort of do whatever I think I need to do to get us to our final result. In my first job though it was more like management sort of figured out, like really broke it down into smaller tasks, so that I had just like a big list of like small items that I could choose from, and just like work this, then work that, then work that. And I didn't have as much freedom to sort of pick and choose what I thought I should be doing, versus the jobs that I've had after my first job, where I've had a lot more freedom to sort of just figure out the problems on my own. And there's pros and cons to both of that. If you're just being told what to do and you just gotta just churn away at the smaller tasks, it's kind of nice. It removes a little bit of the burden from your mind, and you can just sort of sit there and just work through the problems. And then that's it. There's not a whole lot of extra thinking you have to do. Versus if you have more autonomy to do stuff yourself, then you have to spend time thinking, all right, well, what of my infinite possibilities should I be doing? What's the most important thing that I should be working on? And then you have to figure out what's the best way to do that. And sometimes that's a fun aspect of the job, and other times that could be a little more stressful. For me, I've mostly ended up working on sort of the front end of code, which for those of you who don't know, there's sort of 2 main terms. There's like the back end of code and there's the front end of code, whereas the back end is more of like the server side, like database sort of related programming and coding, whereas the front end is more of the application level you're programming what the user sees, what the user interacts with. So I do mostly mobile work, so I'm working with what the user is going to be touching, how they're going to be navigating around the apps. So for me, a lot of the problems involve trying to figure out what's the best placement of this button, and should we have this page here, and what page should that page go to? Just sort of thinking about navigation. It gets into really specifics of like design of like, maybe this should be 2 more pixels over to the left, and maybe this color should be a little bit bluer or a little bit redder, figuring out the font or the font size, or sort of just putting together the look. I guess the real challenge is putting together like a cohesive theme throughout an application. And the tools that we get do a fairly good job of making it easier to sort of apply a theme across a bunch of different elements. Like if you have buttons, or you can have multiple kinds of buttons, and then making them all sort of look like they go together, and making sure all the screens look the same even though they're being programmed by different people. So a lot of my job currently has been sort of figuring out the themes for the mobile apps, and then going back and sort of correcting what other people have done to sort of keep it all in the same cohesive theme. Oh, another part I sort of left out, I guess, one of the other major aspects of programming is working with other programmers. In my current job, I only really work with people over email or over the phone, which isn't a fantastic way to work with other programmers, because sometimes you have to wait 10 minutes for a reply, and then you don't see the reply right away, and then you take 10 minutes to reply back, and then it takes like half the day to get a conversation that could have been handled in like a minute if you've just been in person or something. It can be a little frustrating to communicate remotely with other people. So I definitely prefer it when I can be like in the same space as the other developers, and I can just swing my chair over and just go talk to them if I want to. That's definitely been a much nicer experience that I had in my previous 2 jobs versus my current job, where I'm really the only developer in the office. At least the only developer, well, there's no other developers in the office that I need to talk to. The only developers I need to talk to are in other parts of the country. Well, I don't know if that helped you understand any more about what I do on a day-to-day basis as a programmer, but hopefully it did. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in tomorrow's video. Bye.